Okay, so it's the early hours of the morning on the 30th of March, 2019. Um, this would have been the first day of what would have been Brexit Day. And like I said in the previous video, I think it's worth re-mentioning, mentioning again, I should say. I've never known this country to be in such a state of general uncertainty and disillusion and division as it is right now. And that really concerns me. Um, I want to talk about a specific political ideology, and this relates to the independent group. Today, they announced, well, specifically, Chuka Umunna and Heidi Allen announced that they were forming a political party with the name of Change UK, the independent group. That's the formal name that they're working with. Whether that's going to be shortened, I don't know. Um, Often new political parties experiment a little bit with different names before forming a new name. So Change UK, the independent group, is a working name of this political party as it stands. 11 MPs. 11? Yeah, it's 11. So Chuka Umunna and Heidi Allen look very upbeat under the circumstances. You know, you wouldn't think that they were in the backdrop of current political environment. They looked very upbeat. They said that they were announcing this because they wanted a name before the European elections, and they would have preferred to consult with their supporters, but they had to do this in time for the European elections. That is, if we do take part in those elections, and I believe it's late May. I mean, the new formal date for leaving the European Union is April the 12th, but the way things are going, it's very difficult to know if that will be the date or not. I just don't know. Anyway, I want to talk about political centrism. And I take no pleasure from this video, but I think it has to be said. I think these are things that need to be raised. And that is, namely, problems I see with centrism. Now, my username that I've chosen for this channel is Centrist Philosopher. I explained that maybe in an introduction video, but it's worth mentioning again. So there's two reasons I chose that name. Firstly, I consider my politics to align broadly to the political centre. The philosopher part is not meant to be egotistical. Obviously, I'm not a philosopher. That's meant to be light-hearted. If anyone takes that seriously, it's their problem, not mine. That's honestly a light-hearted thing. I wanted something original. I wanted something a little bit quirky. That's all it is. So I don't see myself as some grand sage. It's honestly just a light-hearted thing. But the centrist bit is more serious because that is where I align my politics. Why do I align my politics to the centre? Well, firstly, I want to get this out of the way because there's a big misconception about centrists or moderates as they would be known in the United States, and that is, oh, they don't believe in anything. It's this absurd idea that unless you're a true blue Tory or you're a red flag carrying socialist, then you don't believe in anything. That is utter nonsense. I strongly believe there are millions of people in this country whose overall political views probably do align to the centre, but they wouldn't necessarily call themselves centrist. Centrism is a bit vague. It doesn't have the connotations of socialism or conservatism. Therefore, people dismiss it as it doesn't mean anything. You don't believe in anything. Aside from being insulting, that is just downright inaccurate. I've got some very strong views on several issues. You know, views that I wouldn't be shifted on. I could be just as dogged as some right wing people and some left wing people. So this idea that centrists are woolly minded, that they don't really have conviction, to put it bluntly, it pisses me right off. That is not true. I've got some very strong views on numerous issues that can actually be probably associated with left or right. But why do I call myself a centrist? So, for example, I've pretty conservative views on crime. So people will say, oh, well, you're a conservative. But I can't call myself a conservative because I'm not conservative on every issue. On the other end of the spectrum, I've got fairly left wing views on welfare. I am strongly against the policy of workfare. I'm strongly against work capability assessments, at least the way they're done at the moment. So some would say that's a left wing position, and I strongly support the minimum wage. So those are left wing positions. Why do I not call myself left wing? Because I'm not left wing on everything. That's why I'm against being shackled by left or right. Because if you say that you're a lefty or you say that you're more to the right, although I have noticed an interesting thing recently, even people who are on the political right somehow see right wing as a derogatory term, which is a bit strange. I mean, if you're right wing, that's just where your ideology lies. It's not derogatory unless you choose to make it so. So I don't really understand why they would get offended at being called right wing if they are just of a right wing persuasion. It's not. I mean, if they choose to be offended by that, then they're putting weight into the derogatory connotations of of the term. Maybe left wingers mean it that way, but they're putting weight into it by choosing to be offended. So back to centrism. Clearly, this independent group is now the centrist political force in Britain. The Lib Dems have had their day. They are really, I think it's inevitable that they're either going to align with this new group or they're going to merge into it or something like that. With Vince Cable announcing his retirement, I think the Lib Dems have had their day. I was a member of the Liberal Democrats for 5 years. There's many people within the party who I respect. There's former leaders I respect, both two late leaders, Paddy Ashdown and Charles Kennedy, are both statesmen whom I have a lot of respect for. One of the things I respect the most about the Lib Dems was their tireless work on electoral reform. I think that is badly needed in this country, and I think that's something they deserve a lot of credit for. The Liberal Democrats also worked on mental health issues before it was popular to do so. So there's a lot of areas the Lib Dems deserve respect. Why did I leave the Lib Dems? Well, I felt Clegg. I gave Nick Clegg a chance. I gave the coalition government a chance, but I felt Clegg was being a little bit too much of a yes man for the Tories. I felt, for example, on welfare issues, he was too, frankly, too right wing. I felt he also just. I felt that the coalition just doesn't work in this country. I wanted to give it a chance because I honestly felt that Nick Clegg had little other choice. And any party leader in his position would have done the same thing. But unfortunately, in this country, coalition governments don't work. That's why they were so badly hammered in 2015. I feel all unfairly so, but that's that. That's what happened. Why did I leave the Lib Dems? Well, that was one reason, but it was also the other end of the spectrum. I had long felt that my own views, for example, on crime and my views on pan Islamism didn't and don't align with the way the party is going. On crime, they're simply too soft, and on pan Islamism, they're simply too silent. I mean, the Lib Dems should be shouting from the rafters about the need to confront the toxic ultra conservative ideology of pan Islamism, but they're passive on it. So their weakness on that is something I found frankly unforgivable. I mean, muted criticism is just not enough. If you call yourselves liberal Democrat, those two concepts are the exact opposite. Those two ideologies are the exact opposite of pan Islamism. So for me, they were far too left on that issue. So really, it was those three things. I think Nick Clegg was too right wing on issues he shouldn't have been right wing, and I think the party was too left wing on issues that I personally couldn't align myself with. That's why I left the party, and that was way back in 2010, I should say, not in 2015. So yeah, the Lib Dems have been the centrist party in this country for 30 years. They've done fairly well in certain elections. In 1997, in 2010, Although 2010, although they got a lot of votes, they were adversely affected by our voting system. But that's, that's just history now. So I do believe this new independent group is kind of going to be the new Lib Dems. They won't say that, and neither will the Lib Dems. But I think we all know they're going to be the new centrist force in this country. Heidi Allen, honestly, I don't know a great deal about, so I can't really judge her as she's been named as the interim leader. A lot of people thought it would be Chaka Amuna, but Heidi Allen's been named as the interim leader. Um, I've no strong views on her right away. I just don't know enough about her. So I'm gonna find out more. I'm gonna find out her voting record. I'm gonna find out all that. So people would assume maybe that I'm wholeheartedly in favour of this new group. So let me put it this way: I'm interested in this new group. I'm certainly going to follow them. I'm on their mailing list. I haven't signed up as a member or anything like that, but I am watching them closely, and I do think it's refreshing between a pretty hard right wing side of the Tories. I'm not just talking about hard Brexit. I'm talking about other policies that aren't getting attention because of Brexit. Things like the pretty ruthless attitude to claimants, which I find I've long opposed that ever since the Conservatives got back into power in 2010. I feel they've been dead wrong on the way they've approached that. It's collective punishment. It's basically putting people through degrading work capability assessments. I think the film I, Daniel Blake, hit the nail on the head. And it's a damn shame what they have done over the last 9 years. It's abhorrent, frankly. So there's that side of the Tories I really don't like. But then I'm very, very skeptical of Corbyn's Labour as well. I mean, this is a man who, there's all the anti Semitism stuff, but there's also his close ties to terrorist organisations, which is irrefutable. There is the fact that he is advised by a Stalin apologist, Seamus Milne, and the fact that the Communist Party of Britain has endorsed Corbyn's Labour. Those are all really warning signs to me that Jeremy Corbyn's Labour is not in a position to govern. I would agree with him in how he talks about fair treatment for claimants on all that. Those are all traditional left wing things I've no problem with. But it's the far left aspects I have a big problem with. So that's why I'm in no rush to endorse left or right. But with centrism, where are the weaknesses? Well, there's some obvious weaknesses, a selling point. The public just don't believe that, even though millions of people actually would agree with a lot of centrist positions, they they just don't believe it. It's hard to sell centrism. It is hard to sell because, rightly or wrongly, centrists are associated with liberal elites. They're associated with the establishment. And no matter what they say, that's what many people will believe. Now, I think there's a reason for this. I think that too often centrists do pander to identity politics. They pander to, how can I put this, issues that the vast majority of the public don't actually care about. The vast majority of public care about things like crime, healthcare, education, those everyday issues. The vast majority of the public don't care about ticking boxes in media representation. The vast majority of the public don't care about prosecuting people for using the wrong pronouns. Now, when centrists really make a thing of those sort of issues, they tend to associate it with the sort of civil rights movements of the past, like the African American civil rights movement or the fight for women's suffrage. I don't believe there's any comparison with that. I do think that we need to be a compassionate society, and anyone that feels that they are being targeted unfairly or bullied or anything like that, of course, those things need to be taken seriously. But endorsing, frankly, totalitarian political correctness is a big mistake, in my view, that centrists often make. And there's a lot of virtue signaling. I mean, when Nick Clegg and Ed Miliband wore those silly T-shirts, "I am a proud feminist." That's an example of the sort of nonsense virtue signaling that just. And the only reason they done it is because feminist lobby groups kept badgering them to do so. David Cameron, to his credit, wasn't taken in by that. I mean, why should a man have to wear one of those silly T-shirts to show that he's for women's equality? It's ridiculous. That's the sort of thing that irritates me about some in the political centre. I also believe that, I mean, centrists are never as far left as the far left, right? But I think they are too politically correct. Tackling extremism isn't just about tackling nasty blood and soil nationalist types, it's also about vocally naming pan Islamism. Too many centrists are politically correct on this. They won't call pan Islamism for what it is. This is not a right wing position. At least it shouldn't be. I find that really galling. I mean, those of us who believe in secular liberal democracies, traditional liberal values, I would say traditional liberalism is what centrists should be looking at, not identity politics, not politically correct virtue signaling. They need to be looking at traditional liberalism because that really does have values. And no, just in case anyone misunderstands me, I'm not saying that they should just ignore trans issues and just ignore diversity issues and all that. Of course not. What I'm saying is the vast majority of the public don't care about those issues. The vast majority of the public don't care if their MP is a man or a woman. The vast majority of the public don't really care if their MP is black or white. What they want is an MP who will work hard for them. And that's what a lot of people in the centre don't really get. You know, socialists are busy fighting the greedy capitalist exploiters, and conservatives, I mean, right wing conservatives, are busy fighting the tyrannical EU. Um, so they're vocal about those things. People see it. And they both pitch to being anti globalist. And that's why the world saw political earthquakes in 2016, Brexit, and the election of Trump, because centrists were out of touch. I don't believe that has to be the case. I still firmly believe that centrism, the middle way, is by far the best option. But unless centrists understand people's grievances, then there'll always be a distant third place. I guess by the nature of centrism, not people are not always going to agree. So someone else might say that they identify with the centre and they disagree with a lot of things I've said here. But one thing I think all centrists would say is that they reject this idea that you have to be shackled by left or right. That's why I'm a centrist. Because ultimately, when I look at all my opinions on all important issues, ultimately it balances out to being somewhere around the middle. So, no, centrism is not woolly minded. It's not a vague concept. I think it's flawed. I think that mainstream centrists need to be less politically correct, um, more in touch with people's real concerns, and that includes issues like immigration. They can't shy away from those things because if they do, then of course it will pan into the hands of, in the case of immigration, the hard right. And if they shy away from other issues like exploitation, serious exploitation, that will pan into the hands of the hard left. So I want to see centrists being more vocal, but not virtue signaling, not pandering to divisive identity politics, which to me is not an asset to liberal democracy. It's a threat to liberal democracy because it divides people. It makes people not individuals, but it treats people like they're part of some homogenous group. They're not individuals. I think that's a very regressive way of thinking. So I believe that centrism is the best way forward, but I do see the flaws with it. So I'm going to look at the script. I'm going to see what direction they go in, and I hope they just use common sense. Pandering to identity politics instead of focusing on the issues that people really care about would be a big mistake.